Do you want to meet my parents?
I mean, the thing about meeting parents is just there's something so official about that. Maybe not.
Well, welcome to the shed.
So yeah, let's go into the movie we are reviewing today, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, written and directed by Charlie Kaufman, starring Jessie Buckley as Lucy, Jesse Plemons as Jake, Guy Boyd as the janitor, Toni Collette as the mom, and the legendary David Thewlis as the dad.
What is the film about?
Yeah, so...
Can you tell us?
Ooh, can we talk about this film? Okay, so from my understanding, this film is about a woman. So the film is about a woman who is thinking of ending things with her boyfriend while they are en route to meet his parents. Most of the film takes place in the car, and there is just this aggressively lengthy back and forth that just becomes so soul-sucking and awkward and amazing.
Huh?
What?
Did you say something?
I don't think so.
Weird.
They do finally reach the parents' house, and that's when a lot of interesting things happen. A lot of awkwardness, a lot of moments that feel surreal, and it doesn't really end at the house. They go to these different locations within the boyfriend's neighborhood, and things just become more and more and more surreal, where it just becomes this sort of breakdown of even knowing what's real, who isn't real, and then it ends in a musical number.
It's true. Do you want to tell us what's actually going on, or should we save that for unpacking as we review?
Ooh, yes. I think maybe saving it for the review might be great, because I think I still need to know what's going on fully, and I think as we go through it, it'll some pieces will come together for me.
Well, that's definitely what most people think is going on, on their first watch. Because that's basically what we're presented with. They're going to meet his parents. It's awkward. She wants to get out of the relationship. And every once in a while, we see this, older janitor character. And we don't really know why on the first viewing. And then, apparently some people are so smart that they can just continue watching this film over and over again and slowly figure out what's happening. I had to watch someone explain it to me, and then we also read an actual interview with Charlie Kaufman where he explained it. Otherwise, I don't think I ever would have figured it out.
Yeah, there are plenty of Easter eggs and interpretations that it's definitely something to watch over and over again, because you constantly catch something that you didn't really see before. And I think both times when I did attempt to watch it, I was curled up on the verge of falling asleep. The first time I got through it to the end, and I fell asleep at the credits. But then the second time around, I don't know, there's something very soothing and quiet about the movie as is, and I passed out. But
there are some elements that are almost like ASMR, because it's just this conversation in this car. And we actually watched it after watching Pride and Prejudice 2005. The contrast.
Mr. Bingley arrived from the north 5,000 years. Really? He's single?
He hasn't been my boyfriend for very long.
They really are looking forward to meeting you.
I think of ending things.
I mean, I feel like most people would consider I'm Thinking of Ending Things as cinema, it's very dense. It's really using the language of film as very well. Not that 2005 Pride and Prejudice doesn't.
He's single?
Let's not even compare them.
that's for another review for sure.
Honestly, it's not even worth comparing. You wanted to review this film. You've seen it. Well, you've seen parts of it multiple times.
That is correct.
What is it about it that compels you?
Oh, okay. Well, first off, and I am brewing with excitement to say this, but the lead actress, Jessie Buckley, her voice is incredible, and it definitely is in ASMR territory. No question about it. I think I could, if she spoke from beginning to end, like throughout the entire film, I would just listen and be like, this was great.
We have a real connection, a rare and intense attachment. I've never experienced anything like it. I'm thinking of ending things.
Also, chef's kiss at the dialogue. I feel like the like just those moments in the car really encapsulates the feeling of being in an intimate like situation with someone you're not really that intimate with at the same time, and those awkward exchanges that just kind of drag on and on that you can't really get out of because you're in a car.
Yeah, the utter horror of it all. And the way it's like freezing outside, which is like reflective of like the internal state when you're in that kind of situation. You're just like, everything's icy and gross and you're like, I just want to get out of this. Like, I just want to drop you off and drive away.
They really are looking forward to meeting you.
I think of ending things.
I think Kaufman does a great job at cueing the audience with things that are not exactly right, but not in a way that's overstated for the most part. When the boyfriend and girlfriend end up at the boyfriend's parents' house, there's this one moment where the girlfriend says, oh, where's, like, do you guys have a dog? And he's like, yeah. And then like, oh, well, where is it? I don't see a dog. And then the dog just appears, and it's like, oh, that's kind of weird. So, and even before that, just even the naming of people just keep changing.
The names keep changing. Her profession keeps changing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the dog is the first major, like, okay, something is seriously not right here, until the parents start aging weirdly, and you're like, okay, this is completely gone off the rails. Like, this is not like a sequential narrative film. Like, this is going all over the place. And I think is really impressive how, like, her name changed, her profession changed. I didn't even notice. I literally didn't even notice because the tone is so constant. You're just kind of swept along in these long, awkward conversations. And just like in real life, if you were actually in those conversations, like, you forget the details and you just don't care. Yeah. Like, it's the kind of situation where someone could literally tell you, like, at the beginning of the conversation, I'm an artist, and then 2 minutes later, she's like, I'm some kind of scientist, some kind of, like, a physicist. She said she was a physicist later. I didn't even notice. And when I was watching, like, an interpretation of the film, and I, like, they were explaining all these things, I was like, how did I not? I mean, it was late. Like, there are many excuses I could make, but I think ultimately the film really, like, lulls you into this, like, I'm just here to, like, experience this, which is very much the state of the protagonist. That's, like, where she is the whole time. She's like, I'm just along for the ride, and then I'm gonna get the heck out of here. I'm not invested in this situation.
Jake tells me you're studying quantum psychics.
Physics.
Really?
I love that you brought up that point about how there is something that's very lulling and kind of lullabic about the film, and at the same time there are these horror elements as well as horrific elements, and these, like, constant switcheroo changes that happen. It's cool that you mentioned that, because I'm curious to know, like, what your thoughts are. Like, do you feel like that was intentional? That and in what way?
I do. Well, first of all, I mean, just the ASMR voiceover where she's, like, rambling and rambling and rambling, and, like, even if when she's not doing the voiceover, she recites this really long poem, like, she's just constantly talking, or someone is, and they're both speaking, like, very softly, even though they're in this, like, car with a snowstorm going on outside, so you think they need to be like, yeah, like, like, when you're in a car like that, like, it gets loud, but they're just, like, these very low, soft voices, and I think it really is kind of to create the impression that, like, this film, well, first of all, it's like a switcheroo, because you're like, okay, this is a basic relationship drama film, and then you're like, oh shit, what's going on here? But it's also so kind of going into, like, the deeper interpretations or whatever people think the film's about, it's all supposedly going on in this man's head who's, like, considering committing suicide. So it might be trying to recreate the, like, numbness of that feeling, especially when you've been thinking about it for such a long time. You've kind of entered this state of, like, I don't even I don't even care anymore. And also the way he dies, hypothermia at the end in the car and everything. There's like a kind of a pervasive numbness throughout the entire thing.
That's very interesting. There's also this this theme of knowledge. There is there is a lot of, there are so many references to so many things, so many books, poets, movies, interviews. It's like this embodiment of an amalgamation of stuff.
To what you were saying, so in that article you sent me, it seemed like the suggestion was from Kaufman that that's like the meaning behind all of these different references is to show how much like media persuades people and how what we create in our brains is so formulated by like what we've absorbed throughout our life. Because like there's the thing with the commercial with like the the ice cream things, the slushy / ice cream / milkshake things. That like clearly is something he saw like a ton growing up, and it's like very stuck in his brain. And then but you'll just see like shelves with like very specific references all over them, and I think the film is trying to convey that like there's no like original thought here, like we really are just a combination of everything we've absorbed throughout our lives.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
especially because we have these different characters who are exposed to these different things, but they show up in one way or another in the perspective of the janitor, the boyfriend, the girlfriend.
Right.
Yeah, it's really spot on.
People like to think of themselves as points moving through time, but I think it's the opposite. We're stationary, and time passes through us.
So there were undercurrents that did exist that we talked about. And the themes, sometimes they're understated and sometimes they're overstated.
Yeah.
Can we unpack that? Were there some that stood out for you that were, I don't know, jarring or just like, oh, okay?
Well, I think mortality, like the death, and because like with his parents, I thought the whole like them aging and then dying was a little bit of an overstatement. But I mean, what's an overstatement? You know, it's what you want. But and then at the end there's like the pig with the maggots that's animated, which is like, here, I guess we're doing this now. So I really like this film. I think we both did, right? Like,
yes.
It's I mean,
yes.
We're both like film students. Like we're like, like, you know, like it's cinema. Cinema. Right. We're both suckers for that stuff. I mean, it's stunning. It's beautiful. It's well paced. I mean, it's just so many things are being done well. One thing I was a little disappointed by, because while I was watching it, I had no idea what the actual underlying story was. I was just going along with these characters. I love Jessie Buckley playing Lucy. I just love her. I just love her. And I loved that the film was very focused on her and like her experience. And I was so excited to see like where she was going to end up. So and then by the end of the film, when it had very much turned more towards Jake and his story, I was very disappointed because I was like, but what about our girl Lucy? Like, why is she being sidelined for like the boyfriend who we never even liked? Like, what's going on here? Now, knowing what the film's, like, actually about, I get it. Like, I get what happened there, because she's just a figment of his imagination the entire time, which is disappointing in itself, because it's like, oh, she was such a cool character. Though, almost all female characters we've ever seen have been a figment of some man's imagination.
Yeah.
So...
that's true.
Doesn't really matter, I guess.
Which brings me to something I was thinking about, like, in classifying whether this protagonist... Lucy is like the manic pixie dream girl. I guess in a way.
She's like the cinema version of the manic pixie dream girl. Well, he also did, he was a writer on Eternal Sunshine, right?
Yes.
Which I know is very controversial. People are like, she's not a manic pixie dream girl, da-da-da-da. Like, that's a very controversial term in general, because, like, as most terms that apply to women are.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a really interesting take, because it's so... like, she's so not what we usually think of, because she's, like, very quiet and chill. But you're right in that, like, she does kind of give him an opportunity to open up. which is like kind of the whole manic pixie dream girl thing. They kind of like change you with like their openness or whatever. But very sad in that she doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, which in itself is interesting too, because being even the terms of, because she's a hybrid manic pixie dream girl, because that's usually associated with someone who is a secondary character. Like that person's never the protagonist. And
that's the thing. Yeah. Is she the protagonist, or is the janitor the protagonist?
Yeah, it gets very it's interesting in that way.
Yeah,
and also the idea of having someone who is imagined by someone else as the protagonist is very, very interesting.
Yeah, well, and one of the questions is also like, to what extent do we control our own fantasies, and to what extent do the characters kind of take control like within the fantasy, which as like writers is a very interesting question, because so often you hear people talking about the characters taking over the scene and like doing what they really want, which I mean I have experienced, and it's fucking sick.
Yes.
I don't have to do my job. You guys just figure it out. Yeah. It's the best. It's the best. So I can kind of see it like in that regard.
Excuse me?
You don't have to go.
I don't have to go where?
Forward.
Yeah, her agency is a really interesting topic in this film.
For sure.
Because she's so against so much of what happens.
Yeah.
But she can't escape.
She can't escape.
Because she's just a figment of his imagination.
And then it's also a question of there's a really, really interesting point in the beginning when the driving is happening, and Lucy is thinking about ending things, and there are times where Jake inserts himself with these questions that literally seem like as if he is calling out her thoughts, but we never really know if he knows what she's thinking. But if she is a figment of his imagination,
then he does.
Or maybe he doesn't, which is interesting.
He doesn't even know what his own... Yeah, that's a really good point. I can totally see the angle of he doesn't even know. Because I feel like sometimes you are fantasizing about someone and you get frustrated and that you're like, this isn't what they would actually... Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know this person. I don't know what's wrong with them, you know? Like, that kind of thing. But there's also the angle of you're having a fantasy and you have that power to be like, I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't in real life. So you use it in the fantasy. You're like, say clever things that are like reaction. You know what I mean? Like you're just you're like a superhuman.
Gosh. Or maybe it's also, there's also this sort of like, I think even in the God complex, this idea that like omnipotence, it's like a weird thing because it's not, it's kind of there, but then by choice, you can opt out.
Right.
So it almost, I wonder if there's something about, like, it's both. Like, maybe sometimes he does have that agency, and sometimes he does not.
I mean, there's a reason in Twilight that Edward can't read Bella's mind, but everyone else's, he can. Anyway, this film, Twilight, Pride and Prejudice 2005, all speaking to each other in great thematic ways.
Very true.
I can read every mind in this room, apart from yours.
I'm thinking of ending things.
Huh?
What?
Did you say something?
But, yeah, because, I mean, it is ultimately kind of a love story.
Yeah.
Between Janitor Man and his internal manic pixie dream girl.
Ooh. You just made me think of something, too. Because even when the janitor does come face to face with Lucy, and they have that moment where they hug, knowing that it's his dream and when he sees her, there must be something very... What is that about?
I don't know. Because it's like, is he full-on hallucinating at that point? Or is it the kind of situation... Because you know when you're fantasizing or just, like, thinking about someone, and you've like, imagined this elaborate scenario, but then suddenly everything kind of shifts, and it's like, or just what if they were here? You know what I mean? Yeah. Or just what if they were, like, right here with me, and we were just having this conversation here instead of, like, on a snowdrift, you know? So it could be playing into just, like, the fantasy becoming more loose, you know?
Yeah.
Or it could be, like, more literal. Like, if his fantasy literally comes walking up into the school. Like, I honestly don't know.
Because that makes me think, too, because, like, I think there is something, because I remember, you know, being a kid and just, like, you know, seeing celebrities and being like, oh my gosh, I love this person, I love that person. And then if I would have like this idea of scenario of meeting them, but then I imagine myself like standing in front of that person, it kind of takes me out.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so I wonder if I mean, I don't know. I picked that.
Yeah. Well, because he does have, because sometimes, like when I was younger, I would do this much more. I would have, instead of me, it would be like an avatar in my fantasy. Now I don't really do that. I've become much more like this is what I got, you know? Like, I don't have that like, oh, but what if like I were like this?
Yes.
No, because that's not appealing anymore, because I know I'm not going to be like that. But when you're a kid, you're kind of like, but what if when I'm an adult, I'm like this?
Yes.
But then you become an adult and you're like, well, if I'm not fantasizing about this, like, it's just never going to happen.
Right.
But the janitor does have an avatar.
He does.
Is it his younger self, though? Or is it just some random plain guy he's made of?
It seems like a random plain guy.
Well, he seems to not... I mean, obviously he's considering ending things, so there's a lot of self-hatred going on. Because he clearly does not like, you know, Jake.
Yeah.
Any more than Lucy does.
Yeah.
Like, he creates this fantasy with himself in it, but then he identifies more with the woman.
Right.
Who he's out with. So, I guess that's part of, like, disassociation. You know? Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
But then at the end, he can't help just going into, like, an egoic spiral and, like, singing a song about, like, how sad he is on stage with everyone watching. So, relatable.
Yes.
Get me a woman to call my
Well, yeah, we can definitely, I think, unpack this for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like we need to attribute some superlatives and awards to this film because it's deserved.
I would say, I mean, this is a very serious one. I would say most interesting male-female dynamics that I've seen in a film in so long. Very interesting.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I would also say really engaging use of voice acting that I don't know if I think I've ever seen, maybe, or at least have seen in a while.
Yeah, because, I mean, voiceovers are so tired. Like, you hear them and you're immediately like, oh, but, like, in this film, you're like, more voiceover, please.
Yes.
Never stop explaining everything to us.
I want some more.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I would say most disgusting ice cream I've ever seen.
Ooh.
Like, milkshake thing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's so gross. Like, I had to like, it's nasty. But, I mean, that was obviously intentional, but it was just like, oh, I can't even look at that. Like, what
It's
is
really
that?
gnarly. There was something very play-ish. I know that a friend mentioned that too, so I guess... Well, no, I shouldn't say that, because I feel like The Glorias probably takes the cake as the most play.
Yeah, we don't want to usurp the
play-ish
Glorias
movie
here tonight. We're not ready for that.
No, we can't. So that, yeah, The Glorias has a throne on that.
That's so interesting that you brought up The Glorias, though, because like, and this is, like, not a great thing to say, because, like, that film was, like, written and directed by a woman, and, like, this one's by a man, but, like, I kind of think this film, for me at least, was more feminist than The Glorias. Because, like, it really taps into that feeling of, like, being a woman and being stuck with this guy, and you're just like, what do I do? Like, how do I get out of this?
Yeah. And I think the idea of having someone who's imagined have agency is...
So true. Like, even in your mind, men, like, the women have agency to not like you very much. Think you're thoroughly mediocre. It's very sad. It's a very sad film.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And on many levels. And I think the idea of being able to cross into another, I don't know, to get past something. Because I feel like in a way, the protagonist never ends things.
Right.
Or Lucy never ends things.
Right. Yeah, which protagonist?
Yeah, which protagonist?
Well, and just the fact that, like, you can watch this film, have no idea what's going on, and still thoroughly enjoy it is so impressive.
Yes.
Like, there's so few films like that. Usually it's like, I need to know, like, what the heck is happening. This one I was just like, I'm lost. Like, it looks amazing. The acting's so good.
It's a vibe.
Yeah.
Maybe this is how it was always going to end.
Huh?
What? Well, thanks for joining us. It sounds like the band has stopped.
Yes, right on time.
So it's time for our date to end.
Yeah,
She will not
'cause-
be meeting my parents.
We will not.
Sorry, everyone.